Well, hello there, everyone. Good evening. Well, I definitely. Oh, that's right, Core. You weren't here to see. Hey, everyone. Yeah, we've had some upgrades. But hello, Solar. Hi, Core. Hi, Wampus. Glad to see you all here. Well, you see, well, sometimes things work out, you find some stuff, and then one thing leads to another, and suddenly, bam, you find yourself in Japan. You guys always make this so much fun just to even begin. You're so silly. Anyways, hi, model. I read your sentence, Core. It messed me up. Hello. Hello, everyone. So, after another long day, we're gonna go ahead and relax with some more books. Because honestly, that's one of my favorite ways to unwind. This model gives you different vibes. Oh, we're only just getting started. Let's see. You're tweaking. Before we begin, though, I just want to check in on everyone. How you all doing? What have you been up to today? Me? I got a lot of party preparations done. Tomorrow's gonna be a very chaotic day. Full of lots of food, drinking. It's the Christmas celebration before Christmas comes. It's gonna be a good time. I'm not drinking though. Personally, I do tend to stay away from that sort of stuff. And yeah, Core, it's still there. Oh, man. Sorry. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. I'm sorry. It's just I'm always overwhelmed. All right. Let's get into it. We're going to go ahead and start with chapter 4 of the Pawn of Prophecy. So, everyone, I didn't hear about your days yet, so please tell me about those, but go ahead and kick back, relax, maybe get yourself something to drink, like some water. You on a notebook already? Yeah, I'm taking a break from Lord of the Rings for now, just because we finished book 1. So I figured we'll try some other things for now. Namely, I'm reading book 1 of my favorite series, and also the Odyssey Simul books. It's very silly. Yeah. So, we'll go ahead and get into it. Get cozy, everyone, because here we go. Chapter 4. The seasons turned, as seasons will. Summer ripened into autumn. The blaze of autumn died into winter. Winter grudgingly relented to the urgency of spring, and spring bloomed into summer again. With the turning of the seasons, the years turned, and Garion imperceptibly grew older. As he grew, the other children grew as well, all except for poor Darun, who seemed doomed to be short and skinny all his life. Runderick sprouted like a young man and was soon almost as big as any man on the farm. Zubret, of course, did not grow so tall, but she developed in other ways which the boys began to find interesting. In the early autumn, just before Garion's 14th birthday, he came very close to ending his career. In response to some primal urge all children have, given a pond and a handy supply of logs, they had built a raft that summer. The raft was neither very large nor was it particularly well built. It had a tendency to sink on one end if the weight aboard it was improperly distributed, and an alarming habit of coming apart at unexpected moments. Quite naturally, it was Garion who was aboard the raft, showing off on that fine autumn day when the raft quite suddenly decided once and for all to revert to its original state. The bindings all came undone, and the logs began to go their separate ways. Realizing his danger only at the last moment, Garion made a desperate effort to pull for the shore, but his haste only made the disintegration of his craft more rapid. In the end, he found himself standing on a single log, his arms windmilling wildly in a futile effort to retain his balance. His eyes, desperately searching for some aid, swept the marshy shore. Some distance up the slope behind his playmates, he saw the familiar figure of the man on the black horse. The man wore a dark robe, and his burning eyes watched the boy's plight. Then the spiteful log rolled under Garion's feet, and he toppled and fell with a resounding splash. Garion's education, unfortunately, had not included instruction in the art of swimming, and while the water was not really very deep, it was deep enough. The bottom of the pond was very unpleasant, a kind of dark, weedy ooze inhabited by frogs, turtles, and a singularly unsavory-looking eel that slithered away snake-like when Garion plunged into the water like a sinking rock into the weeds. Garion struggled, gulped water, and launched himself with his legs toward the surface again. Like a broaching whale, he rose from the depths, gasped a couple of quick, sputtering breaths, and heard the screams of his playmates. The dark figure on the slope had not moved, and for a single instant. Every detail of that bright afternoon was etched on Garion's mind. He even observed that, although the rider was in the open under the full glare of the autumn sun, neither man nor horse cast any shadow. Even as his mind grappled with the impossibility, he sank once more to the murky bottom. It occurred to him as he struggled, drowning amongst the weeds, that if he could launch himself up in the vicinity of the log, he might catch hold of it that he might remain afloat. And so he waved off a startled-looking frog and plunged upward again. He came up, unfortunately, directly under the log. The blow on the top of his head filled his eyes with light and his ears with a roaring sound, and he sank, no longer struggling, back toward the weeds which seemed up to reach up for him. And then Durnick was there. Garion felt himself lifted roughly by the hair toward the surface, and then towed by that same convenient handle toward shore behind Durnick's powerfully churning strokes. The smith pulled the semi-conscious boy onto the bank, turned him over, and stepped on him several times to force the water out of his lungs. Garion's ribs creaked. "Enough, Durnick," he gasped finally. He sat up, and the blood from the splendid cut on the top of his head immediately ran into his eyes. He wiped the blood clear and looked around for the dark, shadowless rider, but the figure had vanished. He tried to get up, but the world suddenly spun around him, and he fainted. When he awoke, he was in his own bed, with his head wrapped in bandages. Aunt Pole stood beside his bed, her eyes blazing. "You stupid boy," she cried. "What were you doing in that pond?" "Rafting," Garion said, trying to make it sound quite ordinary. "Rafting," she said. "Rafting? Who gave you permission?" "Well," he said uncertainly, You just what?" He looked at her helplessly. And then, with a low cry, she took him in her arms and crushed him to her almost suffocatingly. Briefly, Garion considered telling her about the strange, shadowless figure that had watched his struggles in the pond, but the dry voice in his mind that sometimes spoke to him told him that this was not the time for that. He seemed to know somehow that the business between him and the man on the black horse was something very private, and that the time would inevitably come when they would face each other in some kind of contest of will or deed. To speak of it now to Aunt Pole would involve her in that matter, and he did not want that. I mean, hey, we all appreciate some good art, Solar. He was not sure exactly why, but he did know that the dark figure was an enemy, and though that thought was quite a bit frightening, it was also exciting. There was no question that Aunt Pole could deal with this stranger, but if she did, Garion knew that he would lose something very personal and for some reason very important. And so he said nothing. Oh, you guys. It really wasn't anything all that dangerous, Aunt Pole, he said, rather lamely. I was starting to get the idea of how to swim. I'd have been all right if I hadn't hit my head on that log. But of course, you did hit your head, she pointed out. Well, yes, but it wasn't that serious. I'd have been all right in a minute or two. Under the circumstances, I'm not sure you had a minute or two, she said bluntly. Well, he faltered, and then decided to let it drop. You guys are incorrigible tonight. Fine. There. You get to see the other arm. Are you satisfied? Because that's all you're getting. I'm putting it back on. Alright, we're just getting this out. I think I'm going to need some protection for tonight, so don't mind me. Please kick back, relax, and enjoy the stories. Fine, fine. I'll put the weapon away. You're all so silly. At least do a zoom in. I mean, how close are we talking? Because, you know. I suppose this might work. Maybe. Closer. Now that's all you're getting. Now be good. And let's relax a bit. That marked the... That's such a heavy threat. Oh, that is such a dangerous threat. Core, you've completely interrupted story time. Listen, I zoom in. Find the other VOD. Find the other VOD. It's there. It's there, I promise. Oh, goodness gracious. All right. Let the sounds of the soothing waters enter into your ears. Let it soothe your soul. Let's calm down and breathe. Anyways, that marked the end of Garion's freedom, and Pole confined him to the scullery. He grew to know every dent and scratch on every pot in the kitchen intimately. He once estimated gloomily that he washed each one 21 times a week. In a seeming orgy of messiness, and Pole suddenly could not even boil water without dirting at least 3 or 4 pans. And Garion had to scrub every one. He hated it and began to think quite seriously of running away. I don't remember what we talked about. What did I promise? Oh boy. I already helped you with your project. My hair. Oh. You're scaring everyone away, guys. We're supposed to be nice and calm and chill. Oh gosh. Solar. Solar. Down. Please. I should use the timeout command. We'll have it for next time. And now that things have calmed down again, now that we're all being good, please. We'll continue on, okay? There. It's going to be fine. Oh, it's so silly. He hated it and began to think quite seriously of running away. As autumn progressed and the weather began to deteriorate, the other children were also more or less confined to the compound as well. And it wasn't so bad. Underig, of course, was seldom with them anymore, since his man size had made him, even more than Garion, subject to more and more frequent labor. When he could, Garion slipped away to be with Zubret and Darun, but they no longer found much entertainment in leaping into the hay or in the endless games of tag in the stables and barns. They had reached an age and size where adults rather quickly noticed such idleness and found tasks to occupy them. Most often, they would sit in some out-of-the-way place and simply talk, which is to say that Garion and Zubret would sit and listen to the endless flow of Darun's chatter. That small, quick boy, as unable to be quiet as he was to sit still, could seemingly talk for hours about a half-dozen raindrops, and his words tumbled out breathlessly as he fidgeted. "What's that mark on your hand, Garion?" Zubret asked one rainy day, interrupting Darun's bubbling voice. Garion looked at the perfectly round, white patch on the palm of his hand. I've noticed it too, Darun said, quickly changing subjects in mid-sentence. But Garion grew up in the kitchen, didn't you, Garion? It's probably a place where he burned himself when he was little. You know, reached out before anyone could stop him and put his hand on something hot. I'll bet his Aunt Pole really got angry about that, because she can get angrier faster than anybody else I've ever seen, and she can really... It's always been there, Garion said, tracing the mark on his palm with his left forefinger. He had never really looked closely at it before. It covered the entire palm of his hand and had, in certain light, a faint silvery sheen. Thank you for controlling yourself, Solar. I'm proud of you. Keep it up, okay? Maybe it's a birthmark, Zubret suggested. I'll bet that's it, Darun said quickly. I saw a man once that had a big purple one on the side of his face, one of those wagoneers that come by to pick up the turnip crop in the fall. Anyway, the mark was all over the side of his face, and I thought it was a big bruise at first, and thought he must have been in an awful fight. Those wagoneers fight all the time. But then I saw that it really wasn't a bruise, but, like Zubret just said, it was a birthmark. I wonder what causes things like that. That evening, after he'd gotten ready for bed, he asked his aunt about it. What's this mark, Aunt Pole? He asked, holding his hands up, palm out. Did something happen? What's wrong, Cor? Oh. It's best not to worry about that. She's being very good and not, you know. Hi, Green Apple. Good to see you. Yeah, I did say I would stream today, after yesterday. So, we are in the middle of reading some good old Pawn of Prophecy. Keeping things nice, cozy, and relaxed. So, if you want to rest up, found the perfect place again, Green Apple. She looked up from where she was brushing her long, dark hair. It's nothing to worry about, she told him. Fair enough, Green Apple. Fair enough. I wasn't worried about it, he said. I just wondered what it was. Zubret and Darun think it's a birthmark. Is that what it is? Something like that, she said. Did either of my parents have the same kind of mark? Your father did. It's been in the family for a long time. A sudden, strange thought occurred to Garion. Without knowing why, he reached out with the hand and touched the white lock at his aunt's brow. Is it like that white place in your hair? He asked. He felt a sudden tingle in his hand, and it seemed somehow that a window opened in his mind. At first, there was only a sense of uncountable years moving by like a vast sea of ponderously rolling clouds, and then, sharper than any knife, a feeling of endlessly repeated loss, of sorrow. Then, more recent, there was his own face, and behind it more faces, old, young, regal, or quite ordinary, and behind them all, no longer foolish as it sometimes seemed, the face of Mr. Wolf. But more than anything, there was a knowledge of an unearthly, inhuman power, the certainty of an unconquerable will. Aunt Pole moved her head away almost absently. "Don't do that, Garrion," she said, and the window in his mind shut. "What was it?" he asked, burning with curiosity and wanting to open the window again. "A simple trick," she said. "Show me how." "Not yet, my Garrion," she said, taking his face between her hands. "Not yet. You're not ready yet. Now, go to bed." "You'll be here?" he asked, a little frightened now. "I'll always be here," she said, tucking him in. And then she went back to brushing her long, thick hair, humming a strange song as she did in a deep, melodious voice, and to that sound he fell asleep. After that, not even Garrion himself saw the mark on his own palm very often. There suddenly seemed to be all kinds of dirty jobs for him to do, which kept not only his hands, but the rest of him as well, very dirty. The most important holiday in Sindaria, and indeed in the rest of the kingdoms of the West, was Aristide. It commemorated that day, eons before, when the 7 gods joined hands to create the world with a single word. The festival of Aristide took place in midwinter, and, because there was little to do on a farm like Falders's at that season, it had by custom become a splendid 2-week celebration, with feasts and gifts and decorations in the dining hall and little pageants honoring the gods. Long cat, short cat. I like to imagine there was a little shrinking sound. Not gonna lie, I feel a little bad for shutting down the thirst completely. But I'm conflicted, you know? Want things to be nice and calm, but I also want you guys to have fun and enjoy. There'll be more time to, I don't know. Oh well. There is no poopa window. No, I guess there kind of is. You're curious. What other games do I have besides Minecraft and the other horror games I've played? That's a very, very big list. Let's see. Let me take a look at Steam, at the profile. That is over 1,093 games. And that's on Steam. And not on consoles. So, yeah. Got a lot to work with. Now, if you're asking for favorites, that's a different story. Mhm. Sometimes you gotta check the stock and supply, you know? And so, I do know about the Legacy of Kain. I've never played it actually. And do I have Pilgrim? No, but it seems very silly as a lethal company like. So I actually would be interested in trying it. I'll work on getting it sometime soon. Yeah, the Legacy of Kain. An old game from the PS2, right? I think so. Might be PS3. I forgot to pronounce the N, I'm sorry. It's Kane. Kane. There's a lot of words on screen and sometimes I get myself confused. This is what happens after a long day of working. The way the story is told is a lot like Shakespeare. I'll love it for sure. Sounds good. We'll see if I can give it a try then. You highly recommend Blood Omen first since that's the first game? Good idea. Alright. Book time. It had, by custom, become a splendid 2-week celebration with feasts and gifts and decorations in the dining hall and little pageants honoring the gods. These last, of course, were a reflection of Falder's piety. Falder, though he was a good, simple man, had no illusions about how widely his sentiments were shared by others on the farm. He thought, however, that some outward show of devotional activity was in keeping with the season, and because he was such a good master, the people on his farm chose to humor him. It was also at this season, unfortunately, that Falder's married daughter, Anhelda, and her husband, Aelbrig, made their customary annual visit to remain on speaking terms with her father. Anhelda had no intention of endangering her inheritance rights by seeming inattention. Her visits, however, were a trial to Falder, who looked upon his daughter's somewhat overdressed and supercilious husband, a minor functionary in a commercial house in the capital city of Sendar, with scarcely concealed contempt. Their arrival, however, marked the beginning of the Aristite festival at Falder's farm, so, while no one cared for them personally, their appearance was always greeted with a certain enthusiasm. You hit an ace? Good job, Solar. I'm proud of you. We love a gamer around here. The weather that year had been particularly foul, even for Sindaria. The rains had settled in early and were soon followed by a period of soggy snow, not the crisp, bright powder which came later in the winter, but a damp slush, always half melting. Gregarian, whose duties in the kitchens now prevented him from joining his former playmates in their traditional pre-holiday playtime of anticipatory excitement. The approaching holiday seemed somehow flat and stale. He yearned back to the good old days, and often sighed with regret and moped about the kitchen like a sandy-haired cloud of doom. You know, a good old Anyways, even the traditional decorations in the dining hall, where Aristide festivities always took place, seemed decidedly tacky to him that year. The fir bows festooning on the ceiling beams were somehow not as green, and the polished apples carefully tied to the bows were smaller and not as red. He sighed some more and reveled in his sullen moping. And Pole, however, was not impressed, and her attitude was firmly unsympathetic. She routinely checked his brow with her fever checked with her hands for signs of a fever, and then doused him with the foulest tasting tonic she could concoct. Garion was careful after that to mope in private and to sigh less audibly. That dry, secret part of his mind informed him matter-of-factly that he was being ridiculous, but Garion chose not to listen. The voice in his mind was much older and wiser than he, but it seemed determined to take all the fun out of life. Speaking of fun and life, I probably should not say this. You might be angry at me, but I'm working with only 4 hours of sleep today. And I tried to sleep. I went to bed early enough, I think, but I kept waking up every 2 hours, and that was rough. And then woke up, went to work a nice full 8-hour shift, and I'm still awake. Not gonna lie, on my way back home, the spirit of Mickey Mouse possessed me. It happens sometimes, you know. A character just takes over and you can't help but let the spirit go out, you know. We're not doing that tonight, but maybe another time. And don't worry, I'll get some sleep soon after this. For now, though, I do want to make sure that we have time to relax and enjoy some reading. Are you late? No, not at all, Jam Jam. Good to see you. Welcome in. We are still in the middle of the Pawn of Prophecy. And now that I'm done with that little page break, we'll continue. On the morning of Aristide, a Murgo and 5 Tholes appeared with a wagon outside the gate and asked to see Falder. Garion, who had long since learned that no one pays attention to a boy and that many interesting things may be learned by placing himself in a position to casually overhear conversations, busied himself with some small unimportant chore near the gate. Don't worry, Jam Jam, I saw, and I knew. That was already the plan in the first place. You burnt your cookies? I'm sorry, Jam Jam. The Murgo, his face scarred much like the face of the one in Upper Grault, sat importantly on the wagon seat, his chainmail shirt clinking each time he moved. He wore a black hooded robe, and his sword was much in evidence. His eyes moved constantly, taking in everything. The Tholes, in muddy felt boots and heavy cloaks, lounged disinterestedly against the wagon, seemingly indifferent to the raw wind whipping across the snowy fields. Falder, in his finest doublet, It was, after all, Aristide came across the yard, closely followed by an Helda and ale rig. Good morrow, friend, Falder said to the Murgo. Joyous Aristide to you. The Murgo grunted. I take it you're the farmer, Falder? He asked in his heavenly accented voice. The next batch will be better? I agree, Core. Jam Jam's gonna make some better cookies next time that will not burn, and they will be delicious. Yeah. I am, Falder replied. I understand you have a goodly number of hams on hand, well cured. The pigs did well this year, Falder answered modestly. I'll buy them, the Murgo announced, jingling his purse. By the way, listening to me reading has really inspired you, and you ended up recording yourself reading A Midsummer Night's Dream. That's awesome. That's actually really touching, Green Apple. Yeah, Midsummer's Night's Dream is very much a classic. With good old Oberon and Puck and all the sort of mischief and Titania and all those people falling in love with each other, and ooh boy, what a chaotic night that was. Maybe I'll read it sometime. We can compare notes. I'll buy them, the Murgo announced, jingling his purse. Falder bowed. First thing tomorrow morning, he said. The adaptation you had to watch for class was so bad. I do remember... Did I watch an adaptation or did we read it together? I think for class I read it. Did we watch a play? I think we might have talked about a play. Falder bowed. First thing tomorrow morning, he said. The Murgo stared. This is a pious household, Falder explained. We don't offend the gods by breaking the sanctity of Aristide. Seeing me so passionate about reading, it just does something to you, it makes you want to read stuff. That's awesome. Oh, that makes me so happy. Thank you, Green Apple. That means a lot. You read the OG play while watching the 2019 adaptation? Ah. There was a 2019 adaptation? Huh. Cool. Father, Enhelda snapped. Don't be foolish. This noble merchant has come a long way to do business. Not on Aristide, Falder said stubbornly, his long face firm. In the city of Sendar, Aelbrick said in his rather high-pitched nasal voice, we do not let such sentimentality interfere with business. This is not the city of Sendar, Falder said flatly. This is Falder's farm, and on Falder's farm we do no work and conduct no business on Aristide. Father, Enhelda protested, the noble merchant has gold. Gold, Father, gold. I won't hear any more of it, Falder announced. He turned to the Murgo. You and your servants are welcome to join us in our celebration, friend, he said. We can provide quarters for you, and the promise of the finest dinner in all of Sendaria, and the opportunity to honor the gods on this special day. No man is made poor by attending to his religious obligations. You think it was 2019? If not, it was 2 years earlier at that point. But hey, you got through it. That's pretty silly. Yes, Jam Jam? Thank you, Jam Jam. We do not observe this holiday. In Cthulhu Murgos, the scar-faced man said coldly. Ah, you wanna hear? That counts as ASMR, actually. Anyways, we do not observe this holiday in Cthulhu Murgos, the scar-faced man said coldly. As the noble lady says, I've come a long way to do business and have not much time to tarry. I'm sure there are other farmers in the district with the merchandise I require. Father, and Hilda wailed. I know my neighbors, Falder said quietly. Your luck today will be small, I fear. The observance of this day is a firm tradition in this area. You love the click-clacking of keys? That's good to know. The Murgo thought for a moment. It may be as you say, he said finally. I'll accept your invitation, provided that we can do business as early as possible tomorrow. Falder bowed. I'll place myself at your service at first light tomorrow if you so desire. Done then, the Murgo said, climbing down from his wagon. That afternoon, the feast was laid in the dining hall. The kitchen helpers and a half-dozen others who had been pressed into service for the special day scurried from kitchen to hall, bearing smoking roasts, steaming hams, and sizzling geese, all under the lash of Aunt Pole's tongue. Garion observed sourly, as he struggled with an enormous baron of beef, that Falder's prohibition of work on Aristide stopped at the kitchen door. Keyboard stream soon? Yeah. Wow, that was another thing you missed. We had another whispery ASMR quiet sound time. Time? Ooh, I am tired. I'm okay though. In time, all was ready. The tables were loaded, the fires in the fireplaces burned brightly, dozens of candles filled the hall with golden light, and torches flared in their rings on the stone pillars. Falder's people, all in their best clothes, filed into the hall, their mouths watering with anticipation. It's funny being threatened at gunpoint. I know, Core, but luckily the VOD should still be there, or at least the highlights. That way you can catch up in no time. I'm okay, everybody. We'll go ahead and keep reading this. We'll finish up the next chapter of the Odyssey, and then I'll go to bed. And you guys should too. Listen to the stories, relax, close those eyes, and let yourself be whisked away by the sounds. Unless I laugh at something, in which case, sorry. Yes? What's up, Jam Jam? That's a cute emote. Oh. Oh, Jam Jam. When all were seated, Falder rose from his bench at the head of the center table. Dear friends, he said, lifting his tankard, I dedicate this feast to the gods. The gods, the people responded in unison, rising respectfully. Valder drank briefly, and they all followed suit. Hear me, O gods, he prayed. Most humbly we thank you for the bounty of this fair world which you made on this day, and we dedicate ourselves to your service for yet another year. He looked for a moment as if he were going to say more, but then sat down instead. Valder always labored for many hours over special prayers for occasions such as this, but the agony of speaking in public invariably erased the words so carefully prepared from his mind. His prayers, therefore, were always very sincere and very short. Eat, dear friends, he instructed. Don't let the food grow cold. And so they ate. And Helda and Aelbrig, who joined them all at this one meal only at Falder's insistence, devoted their conversational efforts to the Murgo, since he was the only one in the room who was worthy of their attention. I have long thought of visiting Cthulhu Murgos, Aelbrig stated rather pompously. Don't you agree, friend merchant, that greater contact between East and West is the way to overcome those mutual suspicions which have so marred our relationships in the past? We Murgos prefer to keep to ourselves, the scar-faced man said shortly. But you are here, friend, Aelbrig pointed out. Doesn't that suggest that greater contact might prove beneficial? I'm here as a duty, the Murgo said. I don't visit here out of preference. He looked around the room. Are these then all your people? He asked Falder. Every soul is here, Falder told him. I was led to believe there was an old man here, with white hair and beard. Not here, friend, Falder said. I myself am the eldest here, and as you can see, my hair is far from white. One of my countrymen met such a one some years ago, the Murgo said. He was accompanied by an Arendish boy. Runderig, I believe his name was. Garion, seated at the next table, kept his face to his plate and listened so hard, he thought his ears must be growing. We have a boy named Runderig here, Falder said. That tall lad at the end of the far table over there, he pointed. No, the Murgo said, looking hard at Runderig. That isn't the boy who was described to me. Which is against you? What's going on? It's not an uncommon name among the Arens, Falder said. Quite probably, your friend met a pair from another farm. That must be it, the Murgo said, seeming to dismiss the affair. Just a bit buggy? Gotcha. I'm sorry. This ham is excellent, he said, pointing at his plate with the points of the dagger with which he ate. Are the ones in your smokehouse of similar quality? Oh, no, friend merchant, Falder laughed. You won't so easily trick me into talking business on this day. The Murgo smiled briefly, the expression appearing strange on his scarred face. One can always try, he said. I would, however, compliment your cook. A compliment for you, Mistress Pole, Falder said, raising his voice slightly. Our friend from Cthulhu Murgos finds your cooking much to his liking. I thank him for his compliment, Aunt Pole said, somewhat coldly. The Murgo looked at her, and his eyes widened slightly, as if in recognition. A noble meal, great lady, he said, bowing slightly in her direction. Your kitchen is a place of magic. No, she said, her face suddenly very haughty. Not magic. Cooking's an art with which anyone with patience may learn. Magic is quite something else. But magic is also an art, great lady, the Murgo said. There are many who think so, Aunt Pole said, but true magic comes from within and isn't the result of nimble fingers which trick the eye. The Murgo stared at her, his face hard, and she returned his gaze with steely eyes. To Garion, sitting nearby, it seemed as if something had passed between them that had nothing to do with the words they spoke. A kind of challenge seemed to hang in the air. And then, the Murgo looked away, almost as if he feared to take up that challenge. When the meal was over, it was time for the rather simple pageant which traditionally marked Aristide. 7 of the older farmhands who had slipped away earlier appeared in the doorway wearing the long hooded robes and carefully carved and painted masks which represented the faces of the gods. The costumes were old and showed the wrinkles which were the result of having been packed away in Falder's attic for the past year. With a slow step, the robed and masked figures paced into the hall and lined up at the foot of the table where Falder sat. Then, each intern spoke a short piece which identified the god he represented. I am Alder, Kraltos' voice came from behind the first mask, the god who dwells alone, and I command this world to be. I am Belar, came another familiar voice from behind the second mask, bear god of the Alorns, and I command this world to be. And so it went down the line, Chalden, Issa, Nadra, Mara, and then finally the last figure, which unlike the others, was robed in black and whose mask was made of steel instead of painted wood. I am Torek. Dernick's voice came hollowly from behind the mask, dragon god of the Angorax, and I command this world to be. A movement caught Garion's eye, and he looked quickly. The Murgo had covered his face with his hands in a strange, almost ceremonial gesture. Beyond him, at the far table, the 5 Tholes were ashen-faced and trembling. The 7 figures at the foot of Falder's table joined their hands. We are the gods, they said in unison, and we command this world to be. Hearken unto the words of the gods, Falder declaimed. Welcome are the gods in the house of Falder. The blessings of the gods be upon the house of Falder, the 7 responded, and upon all this company. And then they turned, and, as slowly as they had come, they paced from the hall. And then came the gifts. There was much excitement at this, for the gifts were all from Falder, and the good farmer struggled long each year to provide the most suitable gift for each of his people. New tunics and hose and gowns and shoes were much in evidence, but Garion this year was nearly overwhelmed when he opened a smallish, cloth-wrapped bundle and found a neat, well-sheathed dagger. He's nearly a man, Falder explained to Aunt Pole, and a man always has a need of a good knife. Garion, of course, immediately tested the edge of his gift, and quite promptly managed to cut his finger. It was inevitable, I suppose, Aunt Pole said. but whether she was speaking of the cut, or the gift itself, or the fact that Garion's growing up, was not entirely clear. The Murgo bought his hams the next morning, and he and the 5 Thulls departed. A few days later, Anhelda and Aelbrick packed up and left on their return journey to the city of Sendar, and Falder's farm returned to normal. The winter plodded on. The snows came and went, and spring returned, as it always does. The only thing which made that spring any different from any other was the arrival of Brill, the new hand. One of the younger farmers had married and rented a small nearby croft and had left, laden down with practical gifts and good advice from Falder to begin his life as a married man. Hi, Green Apple. Brill was hired to replace him. Garion found Brill to be a definitely unattractive addition to the farm. The man's tunic and hose were patched and stained. His black hair and scraggly beard were unkempt, and one of his eyes looked off in a different direction from its fellow. He was a sour, solitary man, and he was none too clean. He seemed to carry with him an acrid reek of stale sweat that hung in his vicinity like a miasma. After a few attempts at conversation, Garion gave up and avoided him. The boy, however, had other things to occupy his mind during that spring and summer. Though he had until then considered her to be more of an inconvenience than a genuine playmate, quite suddenly he began to notice Zubret. He had always known that she was pretty, but until that particular season, the fact had been unimportant, and he had much preferred the company of Runderig and Darun. Now, matters had changed. He noticed that the 2 other boys had also begun to pay more attention to her as well, and for the first time, he began to feel the stirrings of jealousy. Zubret, of course, flirted outrageously with all 3 of them, and positively glowed when they glared at each other in her presence. Runderig's duties in the fields kept him away most of the time, but Darun was a serious worry to Garion. He became quite nervous and frequently found excuses to go about the compound to make certain that Darun and Zubret were not alone together. His own campaign was charmingly simple. He resorted to bribery. Zubret, like all little girls, was fond of sweets, and Garion had access to the entire kitchen. In a short period of time, they had worked out an arrangement. Garion would steal sweets from the kitchen for his sunny-haired playmate, and in return, she would let him kiss her. Things might perhaps have gone further if Aunt Pole had not caught them in the midst of such an exchange one bright summer afternoon in the seclusion of the hay barn. "That's quite enough of that," she announced firmly from the doorway. Garion jumped guiltily away from Zubret. I've got something in my eye," Zubret lied quickly. "Garion was trying to get it out for me." Garion stood, blushing furiously. "Really?" Aunt Pole said. "How interesting. Come with me, Garion." He started. "Now, Garion." And that was the end of that. Garion's time thereafter was totally occupied in the kitchen, and Aunt Pole's eyes seemed to be on him every moment. He mooned about a great deal and worried desperately about Darun, who now appeared hatefully smug. But Aunt Pole remained watchful, and Garion remained in the kitchen. And that is the end of Chapter 4. Boy, howdy. A lot happened during that one. But alright. Being that I finished this chapter, I'm going to take a small break. Gonna drink some water, take a little stretch, and I recommend that you all do the same. When I come back, we'll move on to the next chapter of the Odyssey. And we'll see what happens from there. For now, though, I'll be right back. Take care. And I'm back. Hello, hello. Drank some water, got up for a little bit, took care of some errors I accidentally made happen. Whoops. At least it's fixed now. And I ended up having to take off my jacket because this little space heater I have is actually very effective. I'm surprised, honestly. Like, I thought it would help a bit because earlier I was absolutely freezing in my own room, but now I'm like, oh dang, kind of starting to sweat a little bit. So that's always nice. I do like not freezing. I know it's been getting a lot colder these days. Like, I think it's -1 in some places too, so I hope you're all staying warm, everyone. And hopefully this stream helps with that, maybe. Inspiring everyone to get some hot chocolate or something. How's everyone doing tonight, though? Doing well? Everyone hanging in there? I hope so. Ah, I know what to do. That's good. Right now, actually covered with a blanket and a sweater and another like coatish. That sounds so cold over there where you're at. When your feet is really cold, maybe put on another layer of socks then. Like, not too many to constrict your feet, of course, but like enough to keep them nice and toasty, you know? I do dislike cold feet and cold hands. Cold hands the most. I also saw that Carmen arrived. Hello, Carmen. I saw you, but there was no Bangaboo. Just a Cassian Radley. Well, all right, everyone. Now that I've settled back in, talked a little bit, slammed some keys on the keyboard, we'll go ahead and start Book 3 of the Odyssey. Telemachus visits Nestor at Pylos. We're now equipped. But as the sun was rising from the fair sea into the firmament of heaven to shed light on mortals and immortals, they reached Pylos, the city of Neleus. Now the people of Pylos were gathered on the seashore to offer sacrifice of black bulls to Neptune, lord of the earthquake. There were 9 guilds with 500 men in each, and there were 9 bulls to each guild. As they were eating the inward meats and burning the thigh bones on the embers in the name of Neptune, Telemachus and his crew arrived, furled their sails, brought their ship to anchor, and went ashore. Minerva led the way, and Telemachus followed her. Presently she said, "Telemachus, you must not be in the least shy or nervous. You have taken this voyage to try and find out where your father is buried and how he came by his end. So go straight up to Nestor, that we may see what he has got to tell us. Beg of him to speak the truth, and he will tell no lies, for he is an excellent person." "But how, Mentor?" replied Telemachus. "Dare I go up to Nestor? And how am I to address him? I have never yet been used to holding long conversations with people, and am ashamed to begin questioning one who is so much older than myself." "Some things, Telemachus," answered Minerva, "will be suggested to you by your own instinct, and heaven will prompt you further, for I am assured that the gods have been with you from the time of your birth until now." She then went quickly on, and Telemachus followed in her steps till they reached the place where the guilds of the Pylian people were assembled. There they found Nestor sitting with his sons, while his company round him were busy getting dinner ready, and putting pieces of meat on the spits while other pieces were cooking. When they saw the strangers, they crowded round them, took them by the hand, and bade them take their places. Nestor's son, Pisistratus, at once offered his hand to each of them, and seated them on some soft sheepskins that were lying on the sands near his brother and father and brother Thrasymedes. Then he gave them their portions of the inward meats, and poured wine for them into a golden cup, handing it to Minerva first, and saluting her at the same time. "Offer a prayer, sir," said he, "to King Neptune, for it is his feast that you are joining. When you have duly prayed and made your drink offering, pass the cup to your friend, that he may do so also. I doubt not that he too lifts his hand in prayer, for man cannot live without God in the world. Still, he is much younger than you are, and as much of an age with myself, so I will give you the precedence." As he spoke, he handed her the cup. Minerva thought it very right and proper of him to have given it to herself first, and she accordingly began praying heartily to Neptune. "O thou," she cried, "that encirclest the earth, vouchsafe to grant the prayers of thy servants that call upon thee. More especially, we pray thee send down thy grace on Nestor and on his sons. Thereafter also, make the rest of the Pylian people some handsome return for the goodly hecatomb they are offering you. Lastly, grant Telemachus and myself a happy issue in respect of the matter that has brought us in our ship to Pylos." When she had made an end of praying, she handed the cup to Telemachus, and he prayed likewise. By and by, when the outer meats were roasted and had been taken off the spits, the carvers gave every man his portion, and they all made an excellent dinner. As soon as they had had enough to eat and drink, Nestor, Knight of Gerene, began to speak. "Now," said he, "that our guests have done their dinner, it will be best to ask them who they are. Who then, sir strangers, are you, and from what port have you sailed? Are you traders, or do you sail the seas as rovers, with your hand against every man, and every man's hand against you?" Telemachus answered boldly, for Minerva had given him courage to ask about his father and get himself a good name. "Nestor," said he, "son of Neleus, honor to the Achaean name. You ask whence we come, and I will tell you. We come from Ithaca, under Neritum, and the matter about which I would speak is of private, not public import. I seek news of my unhappy father Ulysses, who is said to have sacked the town of Troy in company with yourself. We know what fate befell each one of those other heroes who fought at Troy, but as regards Ulysses, heaven has hidden from us the knowledge even that he is dead at all, for no one can certify us in what place he perished, nor say whether he fell in battle on the mainland or was lost at sea amid the waves of an amphithrite. Therefore, I am suppliant at your knees, if haply you may be pleased to tell me of his melancholy end, whether you saw it with your own eyes or heard it from some other traveler, for he was a man born to trouble. Do not soften things out of any pity for me, but tell me in all plainness exactly what you saw. If my brave father Ulysses ever did you loyal service, either by word or by deed, when you Achaeans were harassed among the Trojans, bear it in mind now, as in my favor, and tell me truly all. My friend, answered Nestor, you recall a time of much sorrow to my mind, for the brave Achaeans suffered much both at sea, while privateering under Achilles, and when fighting before the great city of King Priam. Our best men, all of them fell there, Ajax, Achilles, Patroclus, peer of gods in council, and my own dear son, Antilochus, a man singularly fleet of foot and in fight valiant. But we suffered much more than this. What mortal tongue indeed could tell the whole story? Though you were to stay here and question me for 5 years, or even 6, I could not tell you all that the Achaeans suffered, and you would turn homeward, weary of my tale before it ended. 9 long years did we try every kind of stratagem, but the hand of heaven was against us. During all this time, there was no one who could compare with your father in subtlety, if indeed you are his son, and I can hardly believe my eyes. And you talk just like him, too. No one would say that people of such different ages could speak so much alike. He and I never had any kind of difference from first to last, neither in camp nor council, but in singleness of heart and purpose we advised the Argives how all might be ordered for the best. When, however, we had sacked the city of Priam and were setting sail in our ships as heaven had dispersed us, then Jove saw fit to vex the Argives on their homeward voyage, for they had not all been either wise or understanding, and hence many came to a bad end through the displeasure of Jove's daughter Minerva, who brought about a quarrel between the 2 sons of Atreus. The sons of Atreus called a meeting, which was not as it should be, for it was sunset and the Achaeans were heavy with wine. Welcome back, Cor. When they explained why they had called the people together, it seemed that Menelaus was for sailing homeward at once, and this displeased Agamemnon, who thought that we should wait till we had offered hecatombs to appease the anger of Minerva, and thank you, Cor. Fool that he was, he might have known that he would not prevail with her, for when the gods have made up their minds, they do not change them lightly. And so the 2 stood, bandying hard words, whereon the Achaeans sprang to their feet with a cry that rent the air, and were of 2 minds as to what they should do. That night we rested and nursed our anger, for Jove was hatching mischief against us. But in the morning, some of us drew our ships into the water and put our goods with our women on board, while the rest, about half in number, stayed behind with Agamemnon. We, the other half, embarked and sailed, and the ships went well, for heaven had smoothed the sea. When we reached Tenedos, we offered sacrifices to the gods, for we were longing to get home. Cruel Jove, however, did not yet mean that we should do so, and raised a second quarrel, in the course of which some among us turned their ships back again, and sailed away under Ulysses to make their peace with Agamemnon. But I, and all the ships that were with me, pressed forward, for I saw that mischief was brewing. The son of Tydeus went on also with me, and his crews with him. Later on, Menelaus joined us at Lesbos, and found us making up our minds about our course, for we did not know whether to go outside Chios by the island of Syra, keeping this to our left, or inside Chios, over against the stormy headland of Mimas. So we asked heaven for a sign, and were shown one to the effect that we should be soonest out of danger if we headed our ships across the open sea to Euboea. This we therefore did, and a fair wind sprang up, which gave us quick passage during the night to Geristus, where we offered many sacrifices to Neptune for having helped us so far on our way. 4 days later, Diomed and his men stationed their ships in Argos, but I held on for Pylos, for the wind never fell light from the day when heaven first made it fair for me. Ooh, I've got to say, sometimes this is a little hard to read, especially as it brings up so many strange and weird, unique names of places and people that we had never met before. Still, that is how the Odyssey goes, so hopefully I'm keeping up well enough. Therefore, my dear young friend, I return without hearing anything about the others. I know neither who got home safely, nor who were lost, but, as in duty bound, I will give you without reserve the reports that have reached me since I have been here in my own house. Thank you everyone for thinking so. Doing my best. They say the Myrmidons returned home safely under Achilles' son, Neoptolemus, and so also did the valiant son of Poeas. Philoctetes, Endominus again lost no men at sea, and all his followers who escaped death in the field got home safely with him to Crete. No matter how far out in the world you live, you will have heard of Agamemnon and the bad end he came to at the hand of Aegisthus. There we go. And a fearful reckoning did Aegisthus presently pay. See what a good thing it is for a man to leave a son behind him to do as Orestes did. And who killed false Aegisthus, the murderer of his noble father? You too, then. For you are a tall, smart-looking fellow. Show your mettle and make yourself a name in story. A lot of these names are super hard, and another thing came up that distracted me a little bit. But we're here, and we're good. Nestor, son of Neleus, answered Telemachus. Honor to the Achaean name. The Achaeans applaud Orestes, and his name will live through all the time, for he has avenged his father nobly. Would that heaven might grant me to do like vengeance on the insolence of the wicked suitors who are ill-treating me and plotting my ruin. But the gods have no such happiness in store for me and for my father, so we must bear it as best we may. My friend, said Nestor, now that you remind me, I remember to have heard that your mother has many suitors who are ill-disposed towards you and are making havoc of your estate. Do you submit to this tamely, or are public feeling and voice of the heavens against you? Who knows but what Ulysses may come back after all, and pay these scoundrels in full, either single-handed or with the force of Achaeans behind him, if Minerva were to take as great a liking to you as she did to Ulysses when we were fighting before Troy, for I never yet saw the gods so openly fond of anyone as Minerva then was of your father. If she would take as good care of you as she did of him, these wooers would soon some of them forget their wooing. Telemachus answered, I can expect nothing of the kind. It would be far too much to hope for. I dare not let myself think of it, even though the gods themselves willed it no such good fortune could befall me. On this, Minerva said, Telemachus, what are you talking about? Heaven has a long arm if it is minded to save a man, and if it were me, I should not care how much I suffered before getting home, provided I could be safe when I was once there. I would rather this than get home quickly, and then be killed in my own house, as Agamemnon was by the treachery of Aegisthus and his wife. Still, death is certain, and when a man's hour is come, not even the gods can save him, no matter how fond they are of him. Mentor, answered Telemachus, do not let us talk about it any more. There is no chance of my father's ever coming back. The gods have long since counseled his destruction. There is something else, however, about which I should like to ask Nestor, for he knows much more than anyone else does. They say he has reigned for 3 generations, so that it is like talking to an immortal. Tell me therefore, Nestor, and tell me true. How did Agamemnon come to die in that way? What was Menelaus doing? And how came false Aegisthus to kill so far better a man than himself? Was Menelaus away from Achaean Argos, voyaging elsewhither among mankind, that Aegisthus took heart and killed Agamemnon? I will tell you truly, answered Nestor, and indeed, you have yourself divined how it all happened. If Menelaus, when he got back from Troy, had found Aegisthus still alive in his house, there would have been no barrow heaped up for him, not even when he was dead. But he would have been thrown outside the city to dogs and vultures, and not a woman would have mourned him, for he had done a great deed of great wickedness. But we were over there fighting hard at Troy, and Aegisthus, who was taking it easy quietly in the heart of Argos, cajoled Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, with incessant flattery. There we go. Nailed it. At first, she would have nothing to do with his wicked scheme, for she was of a good natural disposition. Moreover, there was a bard with her, to whom Agamemnon had given strict orders on setting out for Troy, that he was to keep guard over his wife. But when heaven had counseled her destruction, Aegisthus carried this bard off to a desert island and left him there for crows and seagulls to batten upon, after which she went willingly enough to the house of Aegisthus. Then he offered many burnt sacrifices to the gods, and decorated many temples with tapestries and gilding, for he had succeeded far beyond his expectations. Meanwhile, Menelaus and I were on our way home from Troy, on good terms with one another. When we got to Sunium, which is the point of Athens, Apollo and his painless shafts killed Phrontis, the steersman of Menelaus's ship, and never man knew better how to handle a vessel through rough weather, so that he died then and there with the helm of his hand, and Menelaus, though very anxious to press forward, had to wait in order to bury his comrade and give him his due funeral rites. Presently, when he too could put out to sea again, and had sailed on as far as the Malian heads, Jove counseled evil against him, and made it blow hard till the waves ran mountains high. Here he divided his fleet, and took the one half towards Crete, where the Sidonians dwell round the waters, in the river Iardanus. There is a high headland hereabouts, stretching out into the sea from a place called Gordon. And all along this part of the coast, as far as Festus, the sea runs high when there is a south wind blowing. But after Festus, the coast is more protected, for a small headland can make a great shelter. All right. Honestly, this is a little rough, and I'm gonna take a quick break. I need some water. Be right back. know. Oh boy, I'm not gonna lie. The Odyssey is wearing me out. It's like, it's a ton of information, and honestly, it doesn't feel very important. All these vast descriptions about how other people are traveling. Did I get the wrong book? I wanted to cover the journey of, you know, Odysseus. But thank you, everybody. It's good to be back. Oh well. It does help to practice linguistics, I guess. After all, proper pronunciation is very, very important. Very key, one might say. Oh well. Now that I'm here, we will go ahead and get right back into it. Here, this part of the fleet was driven on to the rocks and wicked, but the crews just managed to save themselves. As for the other 5 ships, they were taken by winds and seas to Egypt, where Menelaus gathered much gold and substance among people of an alien speech. Meanwhile, Augustus here at home plotted his evil deed. For 7 years after he had killed Agamemnon, he ruled in Mycene, and the people were obedient under him. But in the 8th year, Orestes came back from Athens to be his bane, and killed the murderer of his father. Then he celebrated the funeral rites of his mother and of false Augustus by a banquet to the people of Argos, and on that very day, Menelaus came home with as much treasure as his ships could carry. Take my advice then, and do not go traveling about for long so far from home, nor leave your property with such dangerous people in your house. They will eat up everything you have among them, and you will have been on a fool's errand. Still, I should advise you by all means to go and visit Menelaus, who has lately come off a voyage among such distant peoples as no man could ever hope to get back from. When the winds had once carried him so far out of his reckoning, even birds cannot fly the distance in a 12-month. So vast and terrible are the seas that they must cross. Go to him, therefore, by sea, and take your own men with you. Or, if you would rather travel by land, you can have a chariot, you can have horses, and here are my sons who can escort you to Lacedaemon, where Menelaus lives. Beg of him to speak the truth, and he will tell you no lies, for he is an excellent person. It's interesting when they use repetition. As he spoke, the sun set, and it came on dark, whereon Minerva said, "Sir, all that you have said is well. Now, however, order the tongues of the victims to be cut, and mix wine that we may make drink offerings to Neptune and the other immortals, and then go to bed, for it is bedtime. People should go away early and not keep late hours at a religious festival." Thus spoke the daughter of Jove, and they obeyed her saying. Men servants poured water over the hands of the guests, while pages filled the mixing bowls with wine and water and handed it round after giving every man his drink offering. Then they threw the tongues of the victims into the fire and stood up to make their drink offerings. When they had made their offerings and had drunk each as much as he was minded, Minerva and Telemachus were for going on board their ship, but Nestor caught them up at once and stayed them. "Heaven and immortal gods," he exclaimed, "forbid that you should leave my house to go on board of a ship. Do you think I am so poor and short of clothes, or that I have so few cloaks, and as to be unable to find comfortable beds both for myself and for my guests? Let me tell you, I have store both of rugs and cloaks, and shall not permit the son of my old friend Ulysses to camp down on the dock of a ship, not while I live, nor yet will my sons after me, but they will keep open house, as I have done." Then Minerva answered, "Sir, you have spoken well, and it will be much better that Telemachus should do as you have said. He, therefore, shall return with you and sleep at your house, but I must go back and give orders to my crew, and keep them in good heart. You're definitely getting sleepy? Wonderful. Close those eyes and get some rest as you listen. I am the only older person among them. The rest are all young men of Telemachus's own age, who have taken this voyage out of friendship, so I must return to the ship and sleep there. Moreover, tomorrow I must go to the Cauconians, where I have a large sum of money long owing to me. As for Telemachus, now that he is your guest, send him to Lacedaemon in a chariot, and let one of your sons go with him. Be pleased to also provide him with your best and fleetest horses, but you must finish the book. No worries if you fall asleep. The VOD and highlight will always be there for later." When she had thus spoken, she flew away in the form of an eagle, and all marveled as they beheld it. Nestor was astonished and took Telemachus by the hand. "My friend," said he, "I see that you are going to be a great hero some day, since the gods wait upon you thus while you are still so young. This can have been none other of those who dwell in heaven than Jove's redoubtable daughter, the Trito-born, who shrewd such favors towards your brave father among the Argives." Well, you're not wrong, Cor. But if you need to rest, please do so. "Holy Queen," he continued, "vouchsafe to send down thy grace upon myself, my good wife, and my children. In return, I will offer you in sacrifice a broad-bowed heifer of a year old, unbroken, and never yet brought under by man under the yoke. I will gild her horns, and will offer her up to you in sacrifice." Thus did he pray, and Minerva heard his prayer. He then led the way to his own house, followed by his sons and sons-in-law. When they had got there, and had taken their places on the benches and seats, he mixed them a bowl of sweet wine that was 11 years old when the housekeeper took the lid off the jar and held it. As he mixed the wine, he prayed much and made drink offerings to Minerva, daughter of Aegis-bearing Jove. Then, when they had made their drink offerings, and had drunk each as much as he was minded, the others went home to bed, each in his own abode. But Nestor put Telemachus to sleep in the room that was over the gateway, along with Pisistratus, who was the only unmarried son now left to him. As for himself, he slept in an inner room of the house, with the queen, his wife, by his side. Now, when the child of morning rosy-fingered dawn appeared, Nestor left his couch and took his seat on the benches of white and polished marble that stood in front of his house. Here aforetime sat Neleus, peer of gods in council, but he was also now dead, and had gone to the house of Hades. So Nestor sat in his seat, scepter in hand, as guardian of the public weal. His sons, as they left their rooms, gathered round him. Ecphyron, Stratius, Perseus, Aretus, and Thrasmedes. The sixth son was Pisistratus, and when Telemachus joined them, they made him sit with them. Nestor then addressed them. "My sons," said he, "make haste to do as I shall bid you. I wish first and foremost to propitiate the great goddess Minerva, who manifested herself visibly to me during yesterday's festivities. Go then, one or other of you, to the plain, tell the stockman to look me out a heifer, and come on here with it at once. Another must go to Telemachus's ship and invite all the crew, leaving 2 men only in charge of the vessel. Someone else will run and fetch Larsius the goldsmith to gild the horns of the heifer. The rest, stay all of you where you are. Tell the maids in the house to prepare an excellent dinner, and to fetch seats and logs of wood for a burnt offering. Tell them also to bring me some clear spring water." On this, they hurried off on their several errands. The heifer was brought in from the plain, and Telemachus's crew came from the ship. The goldsmith brought the anvil, hammer, and tongs with which he worked his gold, and Minerva herself came to accept the sacrifice. That is interesting to think about, honestly. Taking a live bull and actually gilding the horns. Weird. Nestor gave out the gold, and the smith gilded the horns of the heifer, that the goddess might have pleasure in their beauty. Then Stratius and Ikemen brought her in by the horns. Aretus fetched water from the house in an ewer that had a flower pattern on it, and in his other hand he held a basket of barley meal. Remind you what gilding means? It basically means to cover in gold. To press the gold on and, yeah, just to sort of cover it. Spelled Gilding. Sturdy Thrasmedes stood by with a sharp axe, ready to strike the heifer, while Perseus held a bucket. Yeah, barley. Then Nestor began with washing his hands and sprinkling the barley meal, and he offered many a prayer to Minerva as he threw a lock from the heifer's head upon the fire. Did I know the gladiator are called barley men? I did not. because of how much they eat barley. That's interesting to know. When they had done praying and sprinkling the barley meal, Thrasymedes dealt his blow and brought the heifer down with a stroke that cut through the tendons at the base of her neck, whereon the daughters and daughters-in-law of Nestor and his venerable wife Eurydice, she was eldest daughter to Clemenus, screamed with delight. Then they lifted the heifer's head from off the ground, and Pisistratus cut her throat. When she had done bleeding and was quite dead, they cut her up. What am I reading? They cut out the thigh bones all in due course, wrapped them round 2 layers of fat, and set some pieces of raw meat on the top of them. Then Nestor laid them upon the wood fire and poured wine over them, while the young men stood near him with 5-pronged spits in their hands. When the thighs were burned, and they had tasted the inward meats, they cut the rest of the meat up small, and put the pieces on the spits, and toasted them over the fire. I mean, it is basically a sacrificial cookbook at this point. And it was their main food. Their diet consisted mainly of barley, beans, and wheat. That's interesting. I do like beans. They're quite tasty when cooked right. Meanwhile, lovely Polycast, Nestor's youngest daughter, washed Telemachus. When she had washed him and anointed him with oil, she brought him a fair mantle and shirt, and he looked like a god as he came from the bath and took his seat by the side of Nestor. When the outer meats were done, they drew them off his spits and sat down to dinner, where they were waited upon by some worthy henchmen, who kept pouring them out their wine in cups of gold. As soon as they had enough to eat and drink, Nestor said, "Sons, put Telemachus's horse to the chariot, that he might start at once. They're all beaned out aside from certain dishes. That's very fair. Beans and toast are really good. I haven't really had that, but it sounds good. Like beans and Jamaican rice? That does sound good. Me? Honestly, I'm down for some nice home-cooked pinto beans. We make them so nicely over here, especially with some nice tortillas, maybe some rice, some eggs to go with it, and that right there is a good breakfast." It's like the main thing in the UK. That makes sense. Thus did he speak, and they did even as he had said, and yoked the fleet horses to the chariot. The housekeeper packed them up a provision of bread, wine, and sweetmeats fit for the son of princes. Then Telemachus got into the chariot, while Pisistratus gathered up the reins and took his seat beside him. Does the bread not get soggy? Well, I mean, if you toast it, it does tend to protect from sogginess, which is generally why you toast the buns when you have a good burger. Of course, if you leave it there for long enough, it'll get soggy anyways. So, you best enjoy it while it's nice, hot, and fresh. Then Telemachus got into the chariot, while Pisistratus gathered up the reins and took his seat beside him. He lashed the horses on, and they flew forward nothing loth into the open country, leaving the high citadel of Pylos behind them. All that day did they travel, swaying the yoke upon their necks, till the sun went down and darkness was over all the land. Then they reached Pherai, where Diocles lived, who was the son of Ortilochus and grandson to Alpheus. And in the UK, it's 5:39. Wow, you're really staying up a long time, Green Apple. Please get some rest if you need it. Goodness, staying up that late just for little old me. I appreciate it. Please get some rest. And the texture would still throw you off, because soft liquid beans and crispy bread? Well, it depends on how the beans are cooked, I suppose. You don't stay up for just anything? Fair enough. Then they reached Pherai, where Diocles lived, who was the son to Ortilochus and grandson of Alpheus. Here they passed the night, and Diocles entertained them hospitably. When the child of morning, rosy-fingered dawn, appeared, they again yoked their horses and drove out through the gateway under the echoing gatehouse. Pisistratus lashed the horses on, and they flew forward, nothing loth. Presently, they came to the cornlands of the open country, and in the course of time completed their journey. Now, when the sun had set and darkness was over the land. And thus ends Book 3 of the Odyssey. Ooh, I'm not gonna lie, that one was kind of a rough chapter to read. So many names, but hopefully you all enjoyed. Speaking of getting some rest and sleep, I do think now probably is a good time. It was wonderful spending time with you all. So, if you'd like to get some rest, now's a good time to do so. There was a lot of names, but I did very well. Thank you, Cor. But I do, again, just want to say thank you all for being here. And I'll see you all next time. Actually, you always wanted to get to hear someone read something kind of like a bedtime story, so yeah, that's why I'm here. You know, I was about to leave, but if it'll put you to bed faster, I do have some old classic children's bedtime stories. You want to hear some corduroy? Maybe The Giving Tree. We'll save Go the Fuck to Sleep another day. Yeah, alright. Because it's nice and short, and I am trying to get you all to rest and relax and close those eyes, we'll go ahead and we'll do corduroy. That is one of the things I said I would do. You're right, you're right. Okay, everyone, kick back, relax again. The glasses are now on. Here we go. Corduroy. Corduroy is a bear who once lived in the toy department of a big store. Day after day, he waited with all the other animals and dolls for someone to come along and take him home. The store was always filled with shoppers buying all sorts of things, but no one ever seemed to want a small bear in green overalls. Then, one morning, a little girl stopped and looked straight into Corduroy's bright eyes. "Oh, Mommy, look! There's the very bear I've always wanted." "Not today, dear," her mother sighed. "I've spent too much time already. Besides, he doesn't look new. He's lost the button to one of his shoulder straps." Corduroy watched them sadly as they walked away. "I didn't know I'd lost a button," he said to himself. "Tonight, I'll go and see if I can find it." Late that evening, when all the shoppers had gone and the doors were shut and locked, Corduroy climbed carefully down from his shelf and began searching everywhere on the floor for his lost button. Suddenly, he felt the floor moving under him. Quite by accident, he had stepped onto an escalator, and up he went. Could this be a mountain? He wondered. I think I've always wanted to climb a mountain. He stepped off the escalator as it reached the next floor, and there, before his eyes, was a most amazing sight. Tables and chairs and lamps and sofas and rows of beds. "This must be a palace," Corduroy gasped. "I guess I've always wanted to live in a palace." He wandered around admiring the furniture. "This must be a bed," he said. "I've always wanted to sleep in a bed." And up he crawled onto a large, thick mattress. All at once, he saw something small and round. "Why, here's my button," he cried, and he tried to pick it up. But, like all the other buttons on the mattress, it was tied down tight. He yanked and pulled with both paws until pop! Off came the button, and off the mattress Corduroy toppled, bang, into a tall floor lamp. Over it fell with a crash. Corduroy didn't know it, but there was someone else awake in the store. The night watchman was going his rounds on the floor above. When he heard the crash, he came dashing down the escalator. "Now who in the world did that?" he exclaimed. "Somebody must be hiding around here." He flashed his light under and over sofas and beds until he came to the biggest bed of all. And there, he saw two fuzzy brown ears sticking up from under the cover. "Hello," he said. "How did you get upstairs?" The watchman tucked Corduroy under his arm and carried him down the escalator and set him on the shelf in the toy department with the other animals and dolls. Corduroy was just waking up when the first customers came into the store in the morning, and there, looking at him with a wide, warm smile, was the same little girl he'd seen only the day before. "I'm Lisa," she said, "and you're going to be my very own bear. Last night, I counted what I've saved in my piggy bank, and my mother said I could bring you home." "Shall I put him in a box for you?" the saleslady asked. "Oh, no, thank you," Lisa answered, and she carried Corduroy home in her arms. She ran all the way up 4 flights of stairs into her family's apartment and straight to her own room. Corduroy blinked. There was a chair and a chest of drawers, and alongside a girl-sized bed stood a little bed just the right size for him. The room was small, nothing like that enormous palace in the department store. "This must be a home," he said. "I know. I've always wanted a home." Lisa sat down with Corduroy on her lap and began to sew a button on his overalls. "I like you just the way you are," she said, "but you'll be more comfortable with your shoulder strap fastened." "You must be a friend," said Corduroy. "I've always wanted a friend." "Me too," said Lisa, and gave him a big hug. The end. And with that, I think that is where I'm going to end it for tonight. So everyone, rest easy, take care, and I will see you all next time. Have a good night. Sweet dreams. Yeah, it's always so nice to read. Bye.